the Germans wanted it, and then they were like, oh, we want this technology. So regular expression still used today. All these things like what's your name? Sorry, John Labide.
No, he's back there. I'm John Franklin.
Oh, okay. I'm John Franklin. All of these things have matured in our culture. As you can see, this John have presented several types of editors, if you would say IDEs or so on and so forth. But any standard Linux, modern Linux distribution today is going to have sys, it's going to have VI, it's going to have awk, and all these kinds of which you can say legacy tools that we can still use today in our applications. And again, a big part of that is the understanding of regular expressions, which if you don't use it in an editor as a command structure to replace text, to look for text, to edit things, and so on and so forth, kind of what you were doing earlier in here, pretty sure that editor uses some kind of regular expressions engine to go in there and to look for text and to replace it or do certain things. I remember I used to go in there and I would type :2 or something, and then I would hit 2, and the next thing you know, I have 22s on the line. And I'm like, how the heck did I do that? So there's like stupid editor tricks like that. Hopefully you showed something like that earlier. But multiplication of your text fields and things like that was a big part of that. And then you're able to look at these things in terms of in Irish, you had your bash shell scripts and things like that. So you had to have a way of terminally accessing these things. So the terminal was a lot quicker to bring up than the emacs interface at certain points in time. But when you're spending $250,000 on a silicon graphics or a Sun computer, you expect some kind of speed performance, especially visually, right? Anybody remember open Windows for Sun?
Yeah.
So in Sun, when you boot up your Spark 1 Plus workstation, you had to literally go in there and type open Windows, and it would take you like 7 to 10 minutes for open Windows to bring up the windowing environment. And on the older Spark stations, they were all black and white, beautiful black and white systems. And you go and you leave, and somebody thinks you left the terminal, and you come back, and somebody's on your terminal. It's like, hey, dude, that's my terminal. I was waiting for it to boot up. So those kinds of visual things were part of the Solaris operating system that we began to look at as a student, how we can edit all these files and things, because everything that we had was a text file. It was either a shell script file, some file that we would input data into, that we would do computation of fluid dynamics calculations, we would edit configuration files, and of course, the PhD and the master students would write all their code in this visual editor. So instead of having that one 22-inch screen dedicated to one programming file, they would bring up their open Windows system and they bring up several versions of Emacs, and that's how one of the reasons we got into Emacs, the visual editor age, I guess you could call it that. And then from there, you were still learning your regular expressions and things like that. To this day, I still don't know a lot of regular expressions. I had to go online and look it up and go, oh, okay, I need this /s and then the caret to begin the line, and my search term, and then my slash, and then my replacement string, and so on and so forth. Today, he just does Control F, and it all magically, and he selects something.
Sublime Editor does have a regular expression engine as well, and I'm always looking up that as well, because there's like 2 or 3 different syntax models for regular expressions.
Right.
And especially if you're trying to find this piece of text and then replace it with this piece of text instead, or capture this and then rewrite it to have this around it instead. There's like 2 or 3 different ways of doing that with backslashes and dollars and whatnot. You got to figure out which one is mine doing and what's the syntax for it. I can't remember either. I use it all the time.
So a lot of us have Macs and things like that. Sorry, Peter.
I'm just gonna put you outside the door.
But it runs Unix. It does. It runs.
Uh-huh.
So I still edit files in VI for quickness, and then for code writing, I use a visual editor. So anybody write code or web code, anything like that? Okay, great. So I was going to look at some of the free stuff, but
Okay.
before we get into that, I wanted to refer you to the Editor War, which is actually a Wikipedia article. So I think that's pretty interesting. And some of the things that they note in this is basically the keystroke execution of commands. There's a difference between VI and emacs, obviously. Memory utilization and customability. Emacs wins out on that because it's infinitely customized as a visual editor. And of course, you can run Emacs in terminal mode and still get that kind of incursive nostalgia if you want to do that. The other key point is user environment. Of course, VI was originally exclusively text-only mode, and we call it a visual editor based on stream editor. So it's basically taking sed, which is a single line editor, where you would say, I want to go to line 32, and then I want to edit this piece of code. Now you can just use your keyboard to navigate to those lines, and then do all your text via command mode, like insert, append, delete, and all those modes, those colon commands, as I call them. Kind of interesting. Language and script support. VI has rudimentary support for languages other than English. And Emacs has full support for all Unicode compatible writing systems and allows for multiple scripts to be freely intermixed. So there's been a lot of internationalization of these two editors going forward, and I think most of that is based on the operating system and how it handles internationalization. So I don't know if people code in foreign languages. So that'll be a really interesting topic to discuss. You do?
I used to.
Oh, okay. So is it a Unicode a thing? You still use kind of the same computer, but you change your Unicode settings?
Well, the computer language is a language by itself.
Okay.
There have been code that have symbols instead of text, but the language itself is all your strings and everything you do,
Okay.
all your shortcuts, it's got to be translatable. I mean, in the last 5-10 years, you have to be Unicode. Before that, we had code tables that Microsoft came up with and all that. But I've been around the era with 7-bit ASCII, and being a non-English language that doesn't agree to how many letters there are in the alphabet was quite an interesting thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
And making sure that printers and devices understood the same character sets. It's quite a challenge, and it's always fun when you look at English-speaking countries, and particularly the US was driving the IT innovation back then.
Right.
Trying to convince a US corporation that what they had done was indefinite stupid and didn't work anywhere else other than the US.
Right.
Was very tough. I can remember that we had one situation where they literally said, why are you using those characters? You don't need them. We kept telling them that every time you use certain special characters, the printer stopped. Because it interpreted that character as something going, why are you using those? Well, that's just a common letter in our alphabet. But why are you using it? Well, we don't use W and X's. Why should we get rid of those? And the comment we got back, well, I guess the Wild Wild West wouldn't be the same without W. But it takes a lot of convincing to just get them to realize that there's a world outside the US that does not agree to 25 letters, 26 letters in the alphabet, however you define it.
And now with the introduction of emoticons, we might be programming in emoticons.
Well, yeah, and then you have Chinese and Japanese and those countries that is even more interesting, and what you call it, secular. Cyrillic, languages and so on, right? That makes it even more interesting, which is why we finally had Unicode come around.
So yeah, I think that would be an interesting topic, Unix and Linux and other languages, and how we handle these types of internationalizations, as I can broadly call it. So Cyrillic and Russian, China, and Asian types of character sets. Because I've seen Asian keyboards before, and I go, whoa.
Unicode is extremely simple. I mean, Unicode is not that hard to understand. How the basic part of UTF-8 is easy. I mean, the way they represent the characters.
That you get to combining character sets. There's some Unicode commands that say take an O and then put a slash through it, and that's with the slash.
Yeah.
But there's also a character that is already that thing combined O with the slash. Do a search and say I'm looking for this, but it's encoded this way.
But that's not your problem, actually. Your problem is
how I'm searching for it.
Well, no. How do you solve it?
Talking about international.
There are different rules of how you order things in different languages. Right? The U.S. seems to be the only country that doesn't follow the ISO rules. But later, when they come in sequence. So I give you an example.
It's not a matter of sequence. It's two different ways of encoding the same letter.
But yes, it is. But that's still not the issue, right? Because that still has a value. You need to figure out where do you put that. Now, if it renders the same, who sees the difference?
Computer Control F doesn't see the difference.
Well, for instance, in password cracking, using different characterizations now, because let's just say the Swedish word for cheese versus the French word for cheese versus the American word for cheese and whatever the variations thereof, there might be different character sets that portray the word cheese as that. So if you look at those types of internationalizations, you have to jump out of UTF ISO 8, right? I think what you're referring to, right? UTF-8, and go to something different to say, oh, I'm typing cheese on an American keyboard, but I need it to be in this language versus that. So how do you, are you
so
saying
the character
that?
set shouldn't, so this is,
Yeah, so
well,
that's what
I
I'm
agree
trying to
there
get
are
at.
some challenges with UTF-8, but it's minimal to what it has. But the character set is a character set.
Right.
And the words are different. Like we have coding standards for how do we make a piece of code. We don't have to hard code a text. So when we want to translate, we actually literally have a completely different set of code for each language. That it doesn't matter.
Right.
And of course, there's a lot of challenges involved because how wide do you need to want to make a field? One language is no might be 2 letters. Our language no is 8 characters.
Yeah.
And how big do you make your drop down for yes no?
Yes.
Right. So those are the kind of challenges you have when you create a piece of software. You're going to say, hey, I want everyone in the world to use this. I mean, that's the challenge there. It's not representing the different words. And fromage and ost and whatever you have in German and those are just different characters. If you want to search to say, hey, I want to get hits regardless of what the language is, that's a coding thing. It's not a character set thing. Right? So a lot of languages also have angwa and gur. I mean, they have different emphasis and so on in characters. The biggest bold issues we really had was about ordering of dates, ordering of characters, and then when you switch languages, those rules change. So
and of course the expression of money,
right.
units and things like that.
But so if you ran the same report as an American user, you would expect one sort order. And if you ran it as a French user, you would expect a different sort order.
Right.
So you can't just make a piece of code that says, well, I'm doing it technically correct. The end user is going to perceive it differently.
Okay.
Right? Those are the kind of challenge you have when you do stuff outside the, a common language. But this is also why you have international companies saying we have an international language internally, one language, because it makes all internal communication, all internal systems easier. And if you have something that is in the local language, it's not an official paper.
Gotcha.
But yes, double A in Danish is sorted differently than a single A. It's not just 2 A's after each other. It's actually a different letter. Right? And if you don't make that happen, it works. And in the DOS days, they couldn't even agree on where in the ASCII code was those characters. So different upgrade, you upgraded one version of DOS to another, and all of a sudden they sorted it differently until we had code tables. And US never made code that understood code tables. ASCII was fine enough, right?
It was.
Yeah.
I mean, but we were first to market, so.
Right.
And so if you want more contextual on internationalizations, I encourage you to watch the original versions of Girls with the Dragon Tattoo series because she does code. She brings up references and stuff, and I think she brings up a editor. I think it's Swedish.
I watch it in Swedish, but it's much better in Swedish.
So her BI editor was in Swedish for one of this. I can't remember which movie. I think it was one of the first ones because she's hacking into this guy's computer. I'm not going to give you more context in that because I think it gets.
One question: has anyone here ever changed your language on your Linux? Have you tried? I mean, it's actually easy.
I've done it on my Android.
Yeah. Well.
Try it on your Garmin.
Yeah. But when you're. But when it's an environment variables, and that is a set local today, you can a local command, a local CTL is easy to change that way too. But it's just an environment variable. And you will get all your system messages in whatever language you set up and your character set. I mean, it's been done pretty easily.
Does anyone set their browser to say, I prefer a particular language?
The most common thing that I do when I go into any editor is turn the freaking colors off because I can't see the damn text. That has bugged me to no end lately.
And that's part of the kernel now, right?
For whatever reason, I've been doing Spring Boot work lately, and STS brings up these colors on it by default that you can almost see. You can almost tell what it is, and I guess it's a function of age and vision and LASIK a few years ago. But there's something about some kid in the past said, "I know I'm going to make this word blue," that I desperately wish that had not become the default. It should
Well,
be.
that's because your
white
default
on
terminal
black
color
here.
is black, correct? Your background color is black.
No, the SDS has a white background, and then these nice
Okay.
pastel contextual aware colors in the thing. That to me is crazy. But
Yeah.
it's
So
a
that, I
popular
mean, I
thing.
have different terminal profiles
Yeah.
that are switched between, because everything is syntax highlighting with colors these days, and you can now turn that off. Like Doc
The
does,
last
change the color.
good innovation was when we went to green on black Weiss terminals. That was the last good UI innovation. You know, the BT100 was a pain. Weiss did a good job. The first time some user said, "I'd like this to be red," and GUIs came around, everything went to pieces.
And Weiss actually, they make the distinguish between a darker green and a
Yes.
lighter green
Yeah, yeah.
and all that stuff. So yeah, I think you have
Monochrome, I
basically-
love monochrome
Yeah.
terminals when they're
Yeah.
wild, yes.
So there
Nice and crisp
are
and all
terminal
gray
emulators that can go
zone.
onto Weiss.
Yes.
So
I just
and
have a
even
good
for
one.
your Mac, there's ones. I think
Oh,
if
yeah.
you use iTerm has a Weiss mode. You have a question back there, sir?
I was going to throw a minute about
Go to speak up, sir.
the colors.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like a huge, so most of this discussion is about choosing UI elements that deal with your brain well. Like how much editor can I get? And I think you can put it up here, it's called Solarize. This guy actually engineered the exact color space so that a small amount of colors work well on both a dark background and a light background.
Do you have a URL to that?
Solarized with a D. Yeah, solarized terminal colors. So this, you'll see the, yeah, that guy.
All right.
So click that, and then scroll down a bit. You'll actually see the color space it shows. And so they kind of put a colossal amount of boundaries.
Yeah.
If you ever want a color space in a terminal legend, it's probably not there.
Can I throw a wrench into that?
Yeah.
I don't see the same colors you do.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the whole point is that he engineered it for contrast against light and dark backgrounds. So regardless of the colors that you see, the notion is that it will contrast with either or the other. I think there are Vim or components. It's also secure with the
It is, but it's so you're with Red Hat, right? So Ansible is one of the tools we have, and they have in their infinitely interesting mind decided to use 9 different colors to indicate status of when you run a job. And I've been on them ever since because half the colors are impossible to read so far, even though they claim they're high contrast. I mean, it's a stupid thing to use as a generic thing.
System B is doing it now.
Yep. Not with that many.
A little bit.
Yeah, but I don't want everything to be black and white just because I perceive that better. But I see it's like a palette of colors, and I have never seen more than a couple being effective.
Is this because you're colorblind, or?
Well, yeah, I perceive colors differently than you do, and there are colors I can't differentiate, and then there are colors I can differentiate that you can't.
Mhm.
But it's just, so I've been told a lot, particularly by women, that men doesn't see colors either. Right? So if you start doing a lot of if you have 10, 15 different colors, there is some nuances too between them that goes away. You gotta be careful. But luckily, at least in the BIM world that I'm in, with the whole syntax highlighting is customizable. So I'll turn it off or choose your own, but I really don't understand why we have to have so many different signals on the same screen. They all drown each other out.
On this track, just for a moment, it's very interesting. You start talking about using colors to discriminate. It's actually dangerous. I worked in the radiation protection field.
Where you say the radiation protection?
Radiation protection.
Okay.
That's my background. People in nuclear medicine color-coded vials of different radioactive materials for injection into patients. Guess what happened? Some patients got the wrong stuff. You got to read the label. And so if you're doing mission critical stuff and you're depending on color, you're dead meat, man.
So here's a discussion, here's an interesting point editor-wise. The next step in editors. Could you do voice? Meaning, do you need, and I'll tell you why I say this. I've been doing a little bit of Amazon Alexa or Echo development, messing around with some skills in it. And I'm getting a greater appreciation of voice interactions, but from the user experience is one case, but the other is from an editor experience and having a smart back end. And by what I mean is, instead of you sitting there typing code, for example, just from the code, or even from the perspective of dictating a document, could you instead solely use voice to be your editor?
Not if you're in Tennessee.
Now, what I mean by that is what's happening with IDEs and cloud IDEs are an example of having a smart back end. Do you really need to know the syntax of a language? Or instead, could you simply say, I need a variable that does this, I need a loop that does this, and have a back end generate that code for you? And it's an iteration in the process that is positively coming rapidly just from BRMS and some of the rule stuff that you mess around with. But imagining doing it with voice, I think, is the next step in.
But there's still languages. In the
end,
end, it's still a language, whether it's spoken or not. Right?
it is, but you don't need to know. You shouldn't have to know the syntax of the language. You should be
Sure,
able to say
otherwise
what
I can't
you
figure out
want.
what it's doing.
You should be able to say what you want and have the IDE or back end generate the code.
But if I
as
don't
you
know
want.
what it is I'm looking at, right? The reason remember, we humans, right? We can both talk and see, and we can write the words up the same way we speak them, but we still choose one media or another depending on the task. I can't imagine, just owning a small program with 10,000 lines and doing that without visualization, right? Without being able to see that and understand the connections, that would be impossible.
What if you saw what was being generated, but you interacted without using the keyboard, you interacted voice-wise only?
I could interact with the voice, but I still need to understand what it's doing, right? In order for me to explain what code needs to do, I still need to understand what the language is about. What type of loop does it support? What kind of logic makes sense? Should I use array? Should I index it? Should I use a hash?
Here's why I say that. And that is, as the back end, as machines get faster and faster, and vastly more efficient, I tend to find I would rather do something in the simplest possible way because the machine is going to do it the simplest, most maintainable and understandable way versus something elegant that takes 4 hours to sit and stare at it and figure out what the
So we've done that since when we started with machine code, right? Then we had assembler, then we had the second generation, and we had Fortran, and we have, 3, 4, 5th, 6th generation languages. But we've had that innovation going, and that's still going. The languages we teach our college kids today are so far away from what the CPU actually understands. But it's still a language. I mean, Perl is still a language. Node is still a language, even though it's not a computer language per se. So I can certainly see how that becomes more simple.
I would argue that your interpretation, your point will be. I mean, I'm gonna relate this to Star Trek and Minority Report. So your interpretation generates a new construct, a new language, because you're assuming that the computer will have data elements already associated with it. So in the way that we now want to analyze information, your construct would be, Alexa, tell me the last 15 products that I bought. And that's you're telling it to say, oh, okay, so it's going to go back and search all that, your product list and all this other stuff, which is basically the construct in which we've already created. And then you go from there. You're not going to, and then from there you go with the if then else's and all that other stuff, saying, all right, Alexa, what products were bought that were less than $15, or so on and so forth. So you're analyzing all the data visually, verbally from that particular standpoint, instead of saying, Alexa, the number of items sold equals 12. And all this other stuff like that.
I'm not saying you do with Excel. What I'm saying is that doing with a machine, everything that you do typing wise, could you do voice wise if you could see what was happening? And when you saw the IDE is going to be smart enough to not let you make syntax errors, et cetera. I mean, it's going to highlight issues and so on. So I've just been interested in for a while now, and whether or not you can talk faster than you can type, and whether you make fewer mistakes.
It sounds like artificial intelligence.
We were talking about those things, entering new code. I need a variable that 2 seconds.
Right.
Here's 10,000 lines small program.
Okay. Well, they all had to be typed. Why did you have to type? Why couldn't you
Yeah,
say?
but what about maintaining it?
Okay. Change line 20 to say this.
Now you have to say what Peter was saying. You have to know how the language is working, because you know it's syntax. It's not going to come back and say,
No, it's still the language. You're still seeing the language on. I'm saying you're just looking at the screen. You're seeing the code, but you're talking to it, the editor, rather than.
So
typing.
so what you're talking about is replacing the keyboard, not the other stuff, which I think
Sure.
we are certainly, we see that with touchscreens, right?
Yeah.
Most new computers is a phablet or tablet or whatever. It doesn't even have a keyboard.
It's just another IDE.
Yeah, and I mean, most of them have a little button that says you can speak to me to a command that you want to do.
Yep.
And that's just replacing the device we're using to communicate with. But it doesn't take away the need to have that editor, or dictate your letter. No one uses Word to write letters anymore, but dictate your email. We've been able to do that for a while.
Ludwig has done a great job of
monitoring. I can't do that, pal.
I'll take
So have you
that.
thought
both
autocorrect is bad
sarcastically
now when you're
and
talking
truthfully.
about
How about
technical
that?
things?
What's that?
If you thought autocorrect was bad, is it bad now?
I just wondered if
Try editing some code with something that's got
You were
autocorrect.
typing-
Hey, I
Never
did not
get
think
anything
I'm desire.
But so I'm saying the editor is aware of voice. It isn't just doing dictation. It also knows that you're saying, go to line 20, show me this method, go to this class, etc. In other words, it's doing that.
But that is what the
extension
IDE can do already. But you have those commands, you're just putting them in a different way.
first. Right.
And I would agree
It's a different
to
way,
the-
correct, yeah.
That in some cases that voice is going to be faster. I must admit, I'm not one of them, but when I see people that really know the editor or the IDE, you can't type that fast if you have to type it all. Yes, there might be those 10,000 lines of code. They did not hit the keyboard 10,000 times.
Right.
I mean, part of the coolness of using an editor, right, is to have it do the hard work.
Yeah.
So if you know the macros, you know the real screen, the things, it will pull down, do the loops for you, do the scaffolding, and you just fill in the little things that you want to do, and you're done, and all of a sudden you have tons of code done. I look at those guys and I go, holy crap, I know why I'm not a primary developer anymore. I can't keep up.
I just wonder sometimes I would like to count the number of times I hit the backspace key a day.
Well, that is proportional with your age, I can tell you that.
So it's just, I've been got a greater appreciation for that voice user experience.
So you're saying we're gonna
Extending it.
have VI, VS, and then SI, which means speech interface.
It's just an interesting extension to think of that.
Well, you can even go even further. Why are you interacting with a pointing device? I mean, we have fighters in the air today where it follows their eyes. They look at a freaking plane they want to shoot down and say shoot. They're not pushing a button. I mean, we can interact with devices today in all kinds of weird ways. I mean, the editor solves a specific problem, but what happens when we have quantum computers? Oh, we don't have text files anymore to control things, but the way we interact with those things are not going to be the same. Now, I don't think programming language 50 years from now is going to look like the text that we have today. I can't imagine, but going 50 years back and looking at the code we created then, comparing to what we do today, you can take a 10-year-old kid can create code today without having to have those high degrees that you had to have in the 50s and 60s to start understanding what to do. And going 50 years forward, it's just, I don't even know, I can't even imagine anymore.
What's your next point?
Actually, one last thing. An audio editor would be kind of cool. Trying to teach a class on, like, going back to John's story from the beginning, it was fine when it was just him in the room. Get 15 kids in there trying to all do audio typing at the same time.
Right. That would be fun, yeah.
Hey, I thought my office already was noisy when I'm in.
Yeah,
I see everyone going, no.
Background noise can really drown everything.
So another visual reference, social media reference would be if you want a visual fighter commands, watch the movie Firefox. And then
Oh yeah, great.
He was thinking, he wasn't speaking, he was there. He was thinking, and that was what was causing Firefox to pick up what he was thinking.
you sure that's not stealth. I'm talking about Firefox because he had to say those. Remember, he said the word accidentally.
He didn't have to say it. He was thinking in Russian. That's what I'm saying. Think in Russian. Don't speak or don't think it.
So yeah, great movie. You should watch it for that. You should keep it there with the Matrix. Forget hackers. That's peaceful. Anyway, so
It has Angelina Jolie in it, man.
and that blind dude. Okay, so to kind of go back on track where we were with the editor situation is that, as we all know today, we have this plethora of different types of editors. We have code editors, we have basic editors that actually are doing certain types of things. And now we have these word processors, visual and speech synthesis word processors that all strain from this basic capability, dare I say, that was created in the Unix environment. And the earlier point that I also had was that now that we've come to the cross platforms, that there's VI and emacs on Windows systems and things like that they have to cross-compile, so on and going forward. We have to learn this, and you can also thank Java for also allowing cross-compilation of code, because now you have Java-based editor, to which I was going to ask the question, was your editor Sublime Java-based? Or is it Java-based? So
I don't know.
Yeah. So and I believe a lot of the more recent IDEs.
I don't think so, because it doesn't feel really slow. I think it's just written in C.
Okay. So at this point, we've got these huge families of different applications, again with web and things like that. Going back to the point about color, and I'm going to add in fonts, because that's another avenue in which the visual is very important. Linda Wyman, the woman who created lynda.com, one of her first books was on web visualizations of colors and fonts and those color combinations. That website, Solarize, reminds me of her color combination sets. So it's an interesting dynamic that these things are now integrated into the operating system as well, versus the editors and things like that. Because my issue with that is when I want to be able to set up a new editor within 10 minutes, right? So I was playing with PyCharm last week. great editor. It follows the freemium model of, this is a free community version, and then take that free community version and they develop the professional version. And you look at the professional price and you go, wow, that's kind of high for normally what I would pay for an editor, and then I have to pay it every year. Okay, so all that aside, the editor is really, really good, but it's focused for Python programming. Now, you can probably trick it and say, let me edit some configuration files in the editor to make it recognize Shell, Perl, PHP, HTML, and all these other types of languages and things like that. But a really good editor that allows me to set up things in a very short amount of time. I can go in there and select maybe one of a handful of color and font combinations. I think it's 7 is the default for community. Fine. And then I can customize that based on my need going forward. I've used Atom. I've used Mac-specific editors. I've used Wings. I've used all these editors. And it takes an inordinately amount of time to set up color combinations. Emacs, I think, started with version 1.19, allowing color in Emacs, I believe. You could go and configure it. It was a pain to go in there and configure your .emacs file to say, I want this color with this font and all this other stuff. Oh, and if you see this language, use this color set, and so on and so forth. So really interesting how we are hopefully closing the customization gap with editors and things like that. So bottom line is that I think we're all going to use our own editor and most of us will use a different editor for each different applications. But at the end of the day, if you need to edit your .bash or C file, you're probably just going to use VI, right? I mean, at the end of the day, right, you're going to use it. It's going to have one color. It's going to have one font. It's in the terminal window. I just need to add this alias in here and get out. I don't need to load this IDE and go find historical.
Is that I started using VI way back when, and that's what I'm best at, and I have to make myself use something else. So I fall back on it as a crutch, and it's exactly that when I shouldn't, because you should get proficient at something else, and yet I'm most proficient is that for that reason.
And now that the Microsoft Windows 10 and whatever they're going to call their next one, which I think is 12, they're going to skip 11 and go to 12. They're probably going to have VI in that as well, since they're going to support the bash shell going forward. So, VI is always going to be your anchor point. Love it or hate it going forward. So again, I wish I had this in a little better context. I tried to put something together, but it wasn't working, and the jet lag was sweeping in, and I thought I'd do the backup PI, so I don't know if nobody got that one either. So, but next time I'll do better. I do want to know, really would like to go back to Linux hardware. So maybe as another topic going forward, anybody build their own Linux computers still or hack them? So maybe we should do some stupid hardware Linux tricks or something, or totally rad Linux hardware setups for a future meeting.
I'm in love with Raspberry Pi. It is just so neat. That's what keeps my fingers in the
We've only
Linux
had about 3 presentations on Raspberry Pi.
Well, we need a 0.14. And then we're good to go. Well, there's only been 3 versions of the Pi so far.
No,
So
We haven't had Apple Pi.
Or Banana Pi.
No. Free Pi.
So Peter, to my earlier point, my paper got rejected, so I'm going to turn my paper into a talk about the hardware parts of single board computers. So I will do that.
Hey,
so hopefully
cool.
we'll get that done before the end of the year. Yeah, all right. So and some Linux hardware. But yeah, I feel you, Raspberry Pi still being utilized in a lot of hacking scenarios, and I think they're using it for the brains of most new drones now. You can buy a drone at the Raspberry Pi's brain to control a lot of other stuff, which I thought was kind of redundant, but I'm not a drone person. Anybody a drone person? Maybe you
That's why I use Raspberries and
So you use a drone and you add the Raspberry Pi to it?
Well, it's your choice, right? The cool thing about Raspberry Pi is it can do OS, multi-threaded, all kinds of advanced stuff.
Right.
You know, so when you have a sensor signal, it can react to it directly. If you use something simple like an Arduino, it's a very simple pull loop that you have running, and you can't do very advanced code or very large piece of code. It's just 8-bit code.
Okay.
And then you have stuff in between. But the reason you want to use the Raspberry is, I mean, it is a full-fledged computer. So if you really like Python to control your drone with, you can use Python to control your drone with. It's just like using your full computer. And you just hook up your monitor and you have a full computer. It's that simple. With your Arduinos and all that stuff, it's a little trickier, right? Because you code it on one thing, write the binary, send it to the chip, and then you check whether the electronics work.
Okay, yeah.
Does anybody have a favorite editor they would like to show off?
Very briefly, for search window.
Meanwhile, how many of you guys are
What are you looking for?
for emacs? No? For VI?
Yeah.
Okay. For a Java-based editor.
I want to get something done.
All right, so VI wins. So officially today, for you guys online, VI wins. Sorry, Emacs.
Site editor, I guess.
Yeah, wins again.
Yeah, this is lightweight, runs on cross-platform. It's in Eagle, you can change typefaces, and it has like some colors. It's small. It's pretty built up to customize it. It almost bridges between an editor and an IDE. You can tell it runs stuff.
Can it run in terminal mode?
I don't think so. It's kind of,
Some other editors of note, like Site, or
I run DI. I can go from my iPad, because I use a program called Server Auditor,
Mhm.
and it creates an SSH shell. And they're different screens. And unfortunately, when you go into the Raspberry Pi, and like you do a directory listing, sometimes depending on which shell you come in through, you can't read the script because of the color. The colors make the listing unreadable.
There's a command. So are you sure it's not alias to them by default?
Well, I'm running it then under the hood. I mean,
Okay.
when you first load the Raspbian, you get a simple version of DI, and you have to upgrade it if you want to be able to do things like
Okay.
the down arrow and that sort of thing. But the fact that it works at all, I find dramatic. Another little comment, and maybe somebody can give me some insight on this. I use LibreOffice all the time. If I copy text to clipboard, I can't paste it into the find box. I have to go in and do the find and replace, and then I can paste it into the find thing, but it won't paste into, if you
So you have to copy it to an editor or some ASCII-based thing, and then select it again and paste it into the file. What you're saying?
I can't paste anything into that file. But I can if I use the find and replace field, and then I can scroll through it.
Sounds like a bug.
Well, no, because I have that in certain systems, and that I also have this on iOS as well. Is that you go from one application and you select it, and it's doing kind of a hypertext select, even though you may not have any URLs in it.
Mhm.
It'll say this, this particular stuff I want to search for in this other application, and then it comes in there, and it either won't paste it because it's not in the paste buffer. It didn't convert it into Unicode, for instance.
Yeah,
And
it's
then,
straight text.
yeah, it's
Or
its
even
own-
worse,
yeah.
paste it with all the HTML and
Exactly.
tags all around it.
Like in Microsoft language, kind of.
Yeah.
Well, I
that
use,
does that double
I
paste.
use a text file to clean off any internal formatting. I do that all the time. Because like, if I don't, it screws everything up.
Some other editors like Skintel, or however you pronounce it. Brackets is really good. It's cross-platform. It actually can be invoked from the command line, so you don't have to go in there and look file this whatever. Once you install it on Windows or Unix or Mac, you can install the add-on to say run this from your terminal window. So like if you want to edit your autoexec.bat file, you can just type brackets, autoexec.bat, and it'll bring it up.
No, it's almost been a decade since I've heard about that file.
And there are a couple, I think Adam does it as well. Again,
ETLN?
yeah. And then there was an editor that was part of the Google Chrome that was really good. But
That looks almost exactly, I mean, you look at that and then you look at, I'm gonna bring them up in 2 different windows here.
yeah. And great.
Come on. Adam, brackets.
Now, the one thing I will tell you in brackets, it's a pure IDE, so you can't cut and paste normally, like you would like Control V or Option V or whatever. I find that really annoying in brackets. I'm sorry, Atom, is that you can't cut and paste from another application into editor. You have to use the mouse to do it.
Mouse.
Yes. I don't think bracket. Yeah. Which, exactly. Yeah. You know. I'm pretty sure there's a ton of more other editors out there. Again, if you're into the language IDEs, anybody ever use Eclipse? I thought that was a really great editor. Yeah, that was a really great IDE. I'm sorry, that had a lot of editing functionality in it because it drew it to your libs and brought up all your libraries that you had installed, which is kind of what you need for Python because every now and then you're installing eggs from other resources or Python or whatever. So
Next thing I really liked until I got projects that were so large that I could not effectively do a search through the entire source code in a reasonable amount of time. It wasn't able to keep up with that. That sort of took me over to Sublime.
Yeah. Any Windows recommendation? Even though these
Administrate.
Windows recommendation. Right.
I installed it.
Notepad++. If you have to run one,
There's a,
They edit is cross-platform.
Yeah.
there's one called
Java
Chocolate
based.
for the Mac that is supposed to have VI key bindings in it. And for the most part it does, but not all of them. And so you end up going in there and thinking, oh, I'm in VI mode, and your finger macros just start going, and then it doesn't work. So, but do I have it installed?
Chocolat. Oh, there you go.
Eclipse is always fascinating, the number of offshoot projects there have been on that, how many other things have been built on top of Eclipse with the platform. So,
Oh, yeah.
surprising.
It's, you can almost pick any language now. It's there. I'm not sure that's a good idea, but as I said earlier, my problem with Eclipse is that it's so huge that to really be effective, it's a learning curve.
Yeah.
Well, they did have Eclipse Lite for a minute. Yeah.
But just learning how to work with it is, you know, a weekend or a week project.
So what were you gonna say?
Well, question is then you have a favorite HTML editor.
Yeah.
Not
Sublime.
in this room.
I'll with you.
Oh, WYSIWYG one.
Well, I shouldn't say with you. Not by, not command line.
And that's what the IDs are about, right? Because your problem is that, you know, other than in the 90s when you have pure HTML files, and that was the only files you really had to play with. Most pages today have code from advanced CSS to JavaScript and other bindings, and putting it all together and testing, putting breakpoints in to figure out why does it
My
not be
pages are
rendered.
simpler than the JavaScript.
Most IDEs have a very good rendering of standard HTML. So you can go in and split your page up. So you have your code on the top, and underneath it shows you the visual, or you can code directly in the visual. If all you want to do put in is static content. But what people do today, they use WordPress or they use Drupal or something else that converts it. As a plugin, and if you want to put content in and write your blog, you don't really code in HTML anymore to put the blog up. That's the way you used to do it, right? And you upload the file. And then there are text
If you want to come up and
The real John.
The real John?
Instead of,
Is there a VGA table up there?
no.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, there is.
While he's setting that up, just thought I'd mention something. We had a couple opportunities to go to Wikipedia. I've been dabbling in a project for the last 2 years to build some education computers, which go places where there's not much net. And so we put Wikipedia on the local box. And you can do this yourself, you can do it on your iPhone, whatever. And the site is Kiwix, it's Kiwix. But they've got software tools and they've got repositories. Wiki in about, I don't know, main language that's out there. And so you have to download your favorite flavor, and you wind up running something called Kiwix Serve, and you can pick port number that you want. But that might be something, if you're doing a Raspberry Pi project for West Virginia or something, might be of interest.
Does it have to have an internet connection or is it all local?
Well, the computers are going to Haiti. And in Haiti, either A, they're so more remote, there's no satellite connection possibility, or B, even if they could get one, they can't afford it. So what we're putting on a server is Wiki in 4 languages and Calibra with a bunch of books from Gutenberg and a project called KA Lite, which is a whole plethora of educational software. And we're tuning it toward French as the language of Haiti, except for one of the wikis says it was the actual Creole Haitian French. But
The local service within clients,
I'm sorry?
so the local server within clients.
Yeah, yeah. So there's the clients are Linux net boxes, which LibreOffice and things like that. But Western Digital has started to provide terabyte drives, so that means we can stack up a lot on one drive. And then they don't have internet, but they have local area net connection to get to it. So we've done a school version, we've done a medical version for hospitals and nurses. And where we're going next, and I'm just the occasional engineer, but we have about 12 or 13 of these things sitting in Richmond jail right now. And the prison fellows, they don't want those guys getting out to the internet. So the idea is that we would give them like a locally available server that they can only connect to that, not to be able to, roll out there, which would isolate them. But at the same time, we begin to put Wiki and Gutenberg and a lot of the digital accessible world, make it available to them. The thing in Richmond's kind of a pilot project. What we'd like to do, would like to see happen is get into the Department of Corrections statewide. But it's all Linux based, and that's really from our perspective, one of the beauties of it is that we've donated laptops that were used in the county school system. They wipe them off, put the Linux Mint on, and they work great. Everybody's happy.
What's the project called?
It's called Haiti Internet in a Box.
Okay.
And some of you might remember a couple of years ago, there was a morning meeting, a guy named Denny Valley walked in on and asked for some help. And so I put my hand up, went down to Warrington a couple of times, and that's what I've done. And we got some other help from Greg and Jamie and a couple of other folks, but if you talk about what's possible with this technology. It's just, real good exercise.
I'm sure you're always looking for new help as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, put your hand up, I'll talk.
One of the, sort of apropos your comment, on Thursday, the Washington Apple Pie Thursday Learners Group hosted Phil Shapiro, and he came in and was showing how you could install Linux Mint on Mac, old Macs that are no longer really supported by Apple, and basically create a very low-cost computer that he can sell to people at this cost.
What, I've seen Phil was in here, and I didn't know about that particular presentation, but basically Phil's doing onesie at a time. What he's got down there is the replication lab. So they line up 4 or 6 boxes at a time. Actually, runs them all of them, and they're all getting reset. So they'll ship 5, 10, 15 computers at a time.
All right, so the real John Levady, the real John Levady is about to show us some nice VI tricks for those of you online. In the door.
You're not seeing the same thing I have. Now I know the voice.
He rebooted.
Not intentionally.
So, but this is a VI trick that we didn't know about?
Yeah, we do, yeah. Instead of VI tricks, is VI hacks.
This is what happens when you talk to your computer, expect it to do something.
Of course, I've got all the logins, and I'll log out and log in again. It's somebody else.
So while he's doing it, I have a question to pose. I really recently pondered the idea of writing the next, or even collaborating on the next best Linux book, because there are a lot of Linux Bibles and stuff out there, and there's a lot of stuff that's really old, and they only do kind of period stuff. And a couple of presses like Pact and No Starch, they do have really good Linux books and things like that. So I was just kind of wondering, like, what would be your idea of the next Linux book that you would want to see on the shelf? Basically, that doesn't necessarily cover how to install the operating system or so on and so forth, or just give you periodic system updates. Like what characteristics that you are missing in today's, because today you have to buy maybe 5 different Linux books to get the information that you want to look for, other than going on the web and looking for it. So if you were to write a Linux book, what would you think would be some of the things you would want to add?
You have to first ask what are you using it for,
Okay.
because someone who's using it as a home user will probably be looking for very different things than if you want to run your own web server.
Okay.
Beginner versus advanced.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good question to post on the
On the mailing list.
mailing list. Got a lot of opinions.
I hadn't noticed.
So You idiot, that's what Google's for. Right.
Now, I don't know why, but it looks like it's only letting me show one workspace at a time. I had hoped to look at the terminal in one workspace
Oh.
and impress in the other. But let me just go with this. Originally, I was only going to talk about one thing, and I realized it was only going to take about 2 minutes to cover, so I added a couple of others. One was actually mentioned today already, the multiple inserts, but I'll show a slightly different use of that. Also, most people don't understand the global command, and the one I really wanted to present was just inserting some shell output. This is the part I was saying about the multiple inserts. Most VI commands, you can take a count in front of them, like move by 8 words, or DD stands for delete 8 line. You put a count in front of it, delete DD. By the way, the little mistakes somebody else mentioned as well. Did you realize on something like DD, you can put the number between them? And that way it says delete 8 lines, as opposed to 8 times delete 1 line.
I do it the second way. I didn't even know the first way.
Yeah, and it turns out if you happen to make a mistake and you do it both ways, it multiplies them. So if I said 20D, 4D, I would end up deleting 80 lines. Because it's 80 times delete 4 lines.
And then you do colon Q bang, says don't save that.
Something like that, yeah. I learned that one time because I was actually planning on moving to line 200, and I entered the 200, and I didn't escape it before I realized I wanted to delete something. So then I did like a D5D, ended up deleting 1,000 lines or something like that. Because the 200 was still sitting there. In any event, one of the things you can also do is with the append command. You don't think of doing multiple appends, but for example, if you did 3A and then you typed in well and hit escape, you would end up with 3 holes in the ground. Well. But that's not very useful. Where it can become useful is, do you ever have to type in lines like between sections? You stand there holding the key down to let it repeat key to insert all your lines. Well, you can actually use the append command by doing 50A 1 line, hit a character, and then hit escape. And all of a sudden it'll shoot out and give you 50 of them. And of course, once you've done that, you need to do it again, you can use a dot command to repeat it. And it'll do the whole 50 character line again. So that was one of the ones I was going to demo quickly, but I can't get back to the terminal. The global, most of us know global from using it for substitutions. Globally search for something like NV and substitute for what you already searched for, Nova. Well, that's actually not a necessary use for global, because you can do that same thing with just a simple substitute command. In case you're not familiar with it, the % character as a line address means from the first line to the end. So %s is the same as doing global. And we want to do it for substitutions, that is. Where it really can become a little more useful is to take advantage of the way that the global command works. It actually works in 2 stages. It first goes through looking for your regular expression pattern, and it marks internally every line that happens to contain that pattern. Then it goes back to each of those marked lines, one at a time, and executes the command that follows the second slash. So it's actually a 2-stage operation. And by the way, I don't know if some of you may not realize, there's a variant form of the global, and that's a V. In that case, it'll mark every line that does not contain the pattern and go back and execute the command on that line. And the other thing from the syntax up at the top, and I'll show you an example of that, global can actually take addresses in front of it. The default is that % that I was talking about, 1 through the end of the file. But you can give it a limited range, say 5, 9 global, and then it'll only do it on those 6 lines or whatever it is.
You said the GRE, the command is print, P?
Yeah, in fact, on the first one, let me show you this example. If you do global for NovaLug and use P as your command instead of a substitute, it's doing globally search for this regular expression and print every line it contains it. And that's exactly where the name grep comes from the old standard ED editor. That's where this command originally came up. So grep is nothing more than globally search for this regular expression and print the lines. Do you ever notice there's no grep command? The variant form of grep, global? But what does grep have to do a search for not? Minus v. It's the variant form. Grep minus v is the variant form. Other things that might be more useful is somebody said you don't like Windows. Globally search for Windows 10 and delete every line that contains it. You can do other things such as collect all the lines that contain tucks and copy them to the end of the file. I want to do something with them. You might end up writing them out to a separate file or such. Surprisingly, you can also put the write command there and write those lines out to a file, just like you would on the command line. But one that I've actually used quite a bit, although there are other ways of doing it. Globally search for, what's the caret? The beginning of the line. How many lines have beginnings? All of them. So this says take every line and mark it, because every line has a beginning. And the M command, that's move. Move it after line 0. Well, the first line is marked. It gets moved after line 0. Doesn't move at all. But then on line 2, move it after line 0, and it goes on top of line 1. Then line 3 goes on top of line 2. Line 4 goes on top of line 3.
So you're inverting the file.
Inverts the file. But you can also do it on just a portion of the file. For example, the next one, here's that addressing I was telling you about. From lines 10 through 40, grep for the beginnings of lines and move them after line 9. So those 31 lines get inverted. Now, I'm not so much saying that all these different things are useful, but just saying you can sometimes take advantage of this two-phase operation of global. Here's one that I've used a couple of times. It turns out Jack broke up with Jill and he's going with Mary now. So search for every line that contains Jack. But the substitution doesn't have to be for Jack. It can be a substitution for Jill and replace it with Mary. And you can also do a global search for things, but not affect the line that was marked, but affect other lines. For example, in the last one, maybe you're globally looking for every section heading, but you need to do something after that section heading. Well, the commands that follow the trailing slash can actually take addresses. So in this case, I'm saying, look for the section lines, but on the line after that, do a join. So I don't know why I would be doing that, just saying the kinds of things that you can do. But if you know, for example, you've got a blank line that comes after each section heading and you want to get rid of it, globally search for, however you can see your section headings, and +1D. It'll delete the line after the section heading. So different things that work because of the way that the global command works. And then the adding shell output to your file. There's quite a few ways you can do it. I mean, you can actually look at the output of the shell and type it in by hand, very error prone. You could run it in a separate window and do cut and paste and bring it into your buffer. There's also a read command, which normally means read a file into your buffer. It could be, it doesn't have to be at the end. I could say 10 read some file name, read it in after line 10. But another possibility is, notice the read command example I have there. :R, after a space you put an exclamation point. That says run this shell command and read in its output into the buffer. So in this case, I'm just doing a simple ls command. And after that, the contents will be after whatever line I issued this command from. But the one I like, and I'll show you that next, is to use vi's filter command, which also happens to use the exclamation point. First, the scenario I'm thinking of now is I compose my emails in VI, and I used to compose a lot of documentation using VI also. because I was writing courseware, I often wanted to provide examples that exactly matched what I saw on the screen. So the technique I came up with was to type in the command that you're trying to demo or you want to explain to somebody. In this case, it's a cat cat dnf.conf file in the etc. directory. Well, you want to show the prompt because that's going to be what they actually see on the screen. But once you've typed that in, get out of input mode and duplicate that line. Your cursor is still on there. So if you use the command YY, are you all familiar with that one? It stands for yank, almost like your cut kind of thing. In this case, it's called yank. And if you double it up, it yanks a line. Just like D doubled up, deletes a line. So in this case, I'm yanking the line, and the P for paste puts it back in after the line I'm on. Well, I was on the line with the $sign, so now I've got a duplication. It so happens that after that paste, your cursor is right on the prompt character, the $sign. You get rid of that because it's going to mess up the next step. So just X that out. So just to duplicate this and get rid of the prompt, it's YYPX. And we're down to a display in our text that looks like those two cat command lines. The next thing is, since you're on the cat second line, type 2 exclamation points. The exclamation is our filter command. Again, doubling it up means filter this one line. I could have said multiple lines, but filter this one line through a command. What will happen at that point, your prompt will drop down to the bottom of the screen, and you can type in the command you want. The command we want is just a shell, SH. So you do exclamation, exclamation, SH, and hit enter. And what that will do is go out to the shell and pass it your line, the cat / blah, 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 to the shell, and receive the output back from the shell and put it into your buffer. So after you got done, you'd be seeing what's down there at the bottom of the screen. So a real quick way of getting exactly the output from the shell into whatever document you're editing with VI. Das ist alles. So probably a lot of what I just said you already know, but maybe there's one or two things you'll find useful at some point.
It's very useful.
Yes.
Can you post that up?
Can you do what?
Would you be able to post that presentation up?
Can we put files onto NovaLug?
The mailing list, no, I will put it on the NovaLug.com.
That's what I meant.
Yes, if you have an account, you can do that, yes.
Okay.
It's pretty sensitive. Text files should be fine. I found out it wouldn't take video files.
We'll take PDFs.
So yes, I've done PDFs in the past,
Okay.
in presentations.
Yeah, I'll put a PDF up.
Thank you.
So I had a guy that unfortunately couldn't make it today. Was in a traffic accident the other day, unfortunately. But he sent me some hints about VI too. If you guys want me to share those, or it's just an email, but I can put them up there too. Unfortunately, I ran out of juice. Let's see what we can do here. Maybe I can't find that line, but it's long enough.
Is that a bill?
No, this is the Lenovo. Let's see if I can actually get it to reach.
You got a plug over there?
Not long enough.
What's on my power plug?
Sorry?
There's no power plug over there?
Well, there is, but I'm running the camera. So if I do that, I lose that. Okay. How can we do this? I will just stop the transmission here. So don't see anyone on